One of the things I love about this platform is being able to talk to leaders like yourself and hear some of your personal insights as to what makes a good leader, but also how you go to work in a potentially dangerous occupation. I think it's fascinating. So in that context, tell me a little bit about some of the things that you have done. And in my mind right now, I have a visual of a movie, and I'm trying to think of the movie. I think
did it win any Oscars?
It did exactly.
Is it The Hurt Locker?
That's the movie.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, The Hurt Locker. So, I always ask this because when I talk with somebody who's been there and done that, I'd love to get their insight as to when you see something on the movie, it's like, okay, where did they get it wrong, or how accurate is it? So that's kind of more like just something I would love to know as a nice to know, but I would love to hear some of the things that you have done, both on land and underwater, that are memorable events in your career thus far.
So, sorry, I wanted to just jump back to the capabilities of Fleet Diving Pacific, which you had touched on before, to answer your question about how does the Hurt Locker in Hollywood, align with the reality of doing the job.
Awesome.
So Fleet Diving Pacific is also responsible not only for maritime ordnance, such as sea mines,
okay,
but they also have a responsibility for land-based ordnance as well. So that'd be anything from grenades to cruise missiles to 2,000-pound bombs. That's called conventional munitions disposal. So those are designed to a certain standard by a recognized factory or nation.
Sure.
You also have improvised explosive devices, which are IEDs. It's a commonly used, or at least a more commonly known acronym, especially since the Afghanistan war.
Right. And
improvised explosive devices are, as the name suggests, they are fabricated in a makeshift capacity, using bits and pieces to achieve, an explosive effect.
Right.
So we also at Fleet Diving Pacific have a counter IED capability.
Okay.
So we have operators who are trained to deal with not only the conventional but also the improvised. So with a movie like The Hurt Locker, what I'll say, so I've trained as an IED operator in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
I did a 5-year exchange there. It was supremely beneficial. But one of the great benefits is that you get the UK IED experience.
Right.
Sorry, IEDD.
Right.
Improvised Explosive Device Disposal experience.
Awesome.
And the United Kingdom are world leaders in this field. So I was a very fortunate beneficiary of that. So what I'll say about the Hurt Locker is, this is not a job where one person goes around and does things. This is not a job where they run down the road with a pair of snips and start cutting things. Often you use remote devices, you use robots to achieve as much as you can, because ultimately it's about keeping the area safe, but also keeping yourself safe so that you can go on to do further jobs.
Right.
The last thing you want to do is go down to an explosive threat that you haven't adequately tried to resolve using a robot. So in the Hurt Locker movie, you see often he's running around doing the business. That's not how I would suggest it truly happens.
It's Hollywood.
It's Hollywood, but what I will say is it does paint a good story.
Right.
It paints a good story for an audience.
Right. Yes.
It paints, the cool, interesting, high profile things, but like anything else, it's the highlights. It's like, you do this as one small part of the job under very specific circumstances. It's not all the time.
Right.
At all.
Right. Very fair. And you mentioned about being in an exchange or going on exchange to England, the United Kingdom. I'd love to hear a little bit about that experience. How do you differentiate what you have learned here in Canada versus what you were taught in your experiences in the United Kingdom?
So Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom have very similar explosive ordnance disposal philosophies. They're all, I wouldn't say they're interchangeable, but they're very close to being interchangeable. So we commonly work with our partners to ensure we have that interoperability. So it's not, I would suggest it's not very different, but I would suggest that especially in terms of improvised explosive device disposal capability, the United Kingdom, because they had some conflict with the Republic of Ireland for quite a long time, that's where many IED philosophies and principles originate from.
Okay.
And the British remain quite active in the world today. And they also have a lot of conventional callouts on the UK mainland because it was bombed extensively during the Second World War and actually the First World War as well.
Right.
And they've been stockpiling munitions for various wars for quite a long time.
Sure.
So whereas in Canada, at Fleet Diving in the Pacific, we get about 85 calls a year to deal with such as this. In the United Kingdom, it's about 300 a year.
Wow.
And
almost
so
one a day.
One a day. So every 18 hours, actually, there's a Royal Navy EOD team, Explosive Ordnance Disposal, on the road dealing with a conventional collar. And they also have they tend to have larger munitions found.
Sure. Yeah.
Than they do in Canada because they were
bombed.
They were bombed by Nazi Germany.
Right. Right.
All right, Jody, so we've made our way up to the Maritime Explosive Ordnance Disposal Department of Fleet Diving Unit Pacific, otherwise known as the BOMB team. So we're just going to head over here into our building. We'll show you a few tools of the trade.
Awesome.
Follow me.
Thank you.
So Fleet Diving Unit Pacific offers two different explosive neutralization capabilities. The first is called conventional munitions disposal. That is the factory-made to a standard items that are produced by militaries or for militaries for use in conflict. We also have a counter IED, improvised explosive device capability, which is to deal with the makeshift explosive threats that we may encounter, particularly when deployed in active theaters. So I'll just bring you a little bit closer here. So many of the tools on display here are meant for counter IED. The crux of counter IED, one of the guiding principles, is to never put yourself in a situation where a robot can do it better. So typically speaking, we employ what we call remote means, or remote devices, robots to accomplish the objective that we're seeking to have accomplished. So this is one of our smaller robots. It's called the Allen Vanguard, but really that's just the name of the company. It's a small robot, slightly less capable than the larger one, but it can be carried by one person. It can be deployed actively on a dismounted team in theater, and it's also useful for small spaces such as on airlines. This is able to fit through the hallway, or sort of the passageway of an airline.
Awesome.
So, number of different tools to accomplish the job, but the principle is the same. The principle is to keep people safe and keep our operators as safe as possible, and to have them do as little, what we would call downrange, down the road, on site, as possible.
Awesome.
So over here, this is a extremely useful piece of kit, often overlooked, is an X-ray. If you want to know what you're looking at, the best thing to do is to X-ray it and see inside of it.
Right.
So this can be carried by hand, but it can also be mounted on a robot to take to your objective area to X-ray remotely. That gives our operators a better understanding of what they're facing, so they're not going down the road without the proper information.
Right.
These are just some examples of items we may come across as a part of our duties for conventional explosives. So this is a conventional anti-tank mine, a conventional rocket, and a conventional solid shot projectile. So over here we have the bomb suit. So contrary to the perception that may be in the public, this is not worn all the time for all reasons. So commonly you'll want to send a robot down the road in order to achieve as much as you can, and only then, once you've done everything you can to make the area safe for yourself and for others, would you don the bomb suit, go down the road, and do what you need to do to accomplish your task. It's not commonly worn for conventional munitions disposal, but it's very often worn in the improvised explosive device, in the counter IED, as a counter IED piece.
Right.
So these are called disruptors. So this is your primary tool to attack an improvised explosive device. What it effectively is it's a water gun. So it's a stainless steel tube that you fill with water, and behind it you put, we call it a shotgun cartridge, but a cartridge that compresses that water once fired, and then projects that stream of concentrated water at a device with the intent to scramble or disrupt the electronic components before they have the ability to complete their circuits and then fire the device.
Interesting. Cool.
So bigger ones, for bigger devices, smaller ones for more precise shots.
Right.
These are just mock-ups of improvised explosive devices. So this is a good example. So if we called this a letter bomb, what you might do, you might have a disruptor upon a robot, which you can then send down the road to target this particular device. Instead of having one of our operators approach on foot, something they're not sure about, instead you employ a robot to accomplish the same means. And this is our large-scale robot. It's called the TO Evo, and this is the backbone of counter IED work. This is what you want to use to accomplish as much of your job as you can before you yourself would go investigate downrange in person. I guess the only other thing I'll add is that Fleet Diving Unit Pacific responds to 85 callouts a year. Not many of them are IED callouts, most of them are conventional callouts for things ranging from projectiles, mortars, grenades, and occasionally larger ordnance. But in the Vancouver area, so around the lower mainland, it used to be used as a training area, certain areas such as in Vernon or around Chilliwack. So that's where, with the military handing land back to the public and making sure it's clear, occasionally when builders come in, they'll dig up an area where they'll find ordnance they didn't expect.
Right.
So that's a very typical call out for our people here in the Pacific.
Interesting.
In addition to, as I described before, the artifacts from the Second World War that veterans may have taken home with them, and then once they pass away, they're typically found by their families upon cleanup.
Right. Right. Very cool. And in terms of geography that you guys cover, how far out do you go when a device is found?
So we are responsible for land ordnance on Vancouver Island up to Nanaimo.
Okay.
Past Nanaimo is the responsibility of CFB Comox. They have an Air Force bomb disposal team there.
Okay.
On the mainland, we're responsible up to Prince George, and then we are responsible eastward out to the Alberta border.
Wow.
But for underwater ordnance, so that is devices found in the water,
Yep.
we're responsible all the way out to Thunder Bay.
Wow, holy smokes. So a good portion of Canada.
A good portion of Canada. Although, to be fair, in terms of underwater ordnance throughout Canada, if they're in areas that are very remote where it's unlikely to be disturbed, oftentimes we note it, we make a log of it, but we won't necessarily dispatch a team because the threat to the public is extremely low.
Right.
We'll just mark the area, make sure everyone knows where it is, but often we're not called upon to deal with it if it's exceptionally remote and underwater.
Right, right. And for the robot that's behind you, how long does it take to get up to speed to properly operate a piece of equipment like that?
So we undertake a great deal of training as part of the clearance diver trade. So the first course you'll do is your conventional basic explosives course. It's about 6 weeks long, conducted at CFB Gagetown, and this will enable you to identify ordnance through generics. So you can generically tell what it is, but it doesn't allow you to conduct what we would call a render safe procedure. So you'll be able to look at something, determine if it is safe to move or not safe to move, and then if it is not safe to move, you can only blow it up on site or destroy it by controlled demolition. So that's your basic understanding package. So next, you'll do an 8-month course in the United States of America at Eglin Air Force Base. So this is the Advanced Conventional Munitions Disposal course, which covers everything from grenades to cruise missiles. There's a small phase on improvised explosive devices, and then the underwater ordnance as well. That takes 8 months, and then when members come back, they're qualified to conduct, again, those render safe procedures. So now instead of only being able to pick up or destroy on site, you have the option to investigate closely and come up with a plan to safely prosecute a device in the hopes that you can render it then safe to move or safer to move out of the area.
Interesting. And one of the things I haven't asked you yet is how many people are specialists in your trade? Because this is specialized training, so I'm curious to know in the Navy and specifically Fleet Dive Unit Pacific, where you are the executive officer, how many people in this unit?
So in the unit itself, there's 108 personnel.
Okay.
There's about 56 clearance divers, and in total in Canada, there's about 135 clearance divers spread out between the West Coast, CFB Shearwater in Halifax, and also at the Experimental Diving Group in Toronto. So 135 overall in the unit here out of 108. We're approximately half the number, and the other members who make up the staff are logisticians, supply techs, engineers are a large component, and also reservist port inspection divers who often supplement our diving teams.
Awesome. Awesome. So great kind of elite, very small, close-knit unit.
It's certainly a tight-knit, small unit. I think that's one of the greatest benefits to working in fleet diving in the Pacific or any clearance diving unit is it's small, it's an intimate organization, you work in small teams, and you have the opportunity to fly around the world to do your job on behalf of the Royal Canadian Navy in that small team, which I don't believe you'll get on a larger ship. Best thing about being on a large ship is you have the big core crew, but working with a small team, the close, intimate partnerships that you established are tough to beat. It's really nice to come to work every day with a group of people who are enthusiastic and motivated and happy to be here. And that's what I find, because the training is so difficult, the pipeline is so difficult to become a clearance diver. That's what you will receive on the opposite end, is those types of motivated people.
Right on, right on. Thank you very much, Lieutenant.
Pleasure. So this is one of the vehicles we may elect to deploy when we're called upon to neutralize an explosive threat. It's equipped to deal with both conventional and improvised callouts. Predominantly though, this is the vehicle we would deploy to an improvised callout. So on board it has both styles of bomb disposal robot, which you've seen earlier. It will have all of the different disruptors and disruptor cartridges to neutralize a wide range of packages. But it will also carry the conventional explosives required to deal with conventional type threats. So those are the grenades, the projectiles, the solid shot projectiles that we've also demonstrated earlier. It can carry up to 5 personnel, though we typically deploy in teams of 2, and has additional features such as it has a high-masted camera, so we can perform long-range reconnaissance of an area if it's out in the open and get that better intelligence as to what we're facing at a further distance. Again, one of the main principles of improvised explosive device disposal is keeping the operator as safe as possible and doing everything as remote as you can.
Awesome. Awesome. Let's go take a look around and
here you see an example of our larger robot, which has approached a suspicious package. So again, this is typically what you'll want to deploy first in order to deal with what you have down the road. Not only does it have a number of camera systems to give you a better on-site picture of what you're facing, it also carries tools to commence a neutralization of your suspect package down there. This will be the smaller of the 2 robots. Again, very useful for smaller, more confined quarters because it's not always appropriate or available the space you would need to deploy the larger variant. Both of which are carried on board the bomb truck here. And the bottom line is we wish to provide our operators all the tools they can use in order to safely neutralize explosive threats. So the more tools we can provide them, the safer they will be.
That's awesome. And how long does it take to get up to speed to operate one of these robots?
So in terms of training, we discussed before, it's a 6-week conventional basic munitions course. It is a 7 to 8 month advanced conventional munitions course down at Eglin Air Force Base in the United States. And then in terms of improvised device disposal, it's another 4-week operator assist course. So that's where you learn to drive the weapons, you understand the different disruptors. Essentially you are the subject matter expert in the tools themselves. And then the number 1 operators course, where you lead an improvised explosive device call out, is 3 months in duration.
Awesome. And the way that you would approach a suspect device like we're looking at right now is with robot, but it's got multiple cameras. And then describe to me what is at the end of that arm.
So just you're speaking about this right here.
Yep.
So this is a disruptor. So essentially what it is it's a water gun. So it's a stainless steel tube or titanium tube that has a quantity of water in it, backed up by its shotgun cartridge. So when you manipulate it into position, that cartridge fires, compresses the water into a high energy, dense burst of water that will hit an electronic package with the intent to disrupt and separate the electronic components before they have a chance to connect their circuits and fire electronically. This is the preferred means of dealing with almost any type of electrically initiated improvised explosive. So we won't always deploy either robots or people to deal with an improvised explosive device call-out, because sometimes those are they turn out to be hoaxes or they turn out to be mistakes. So a prime example might be a gym bag left behind by a military gym. If we didn't understand where that bag came from, we might be called to investigate, but that could turn out to be not a device. So you may not need to employ a robot or even a person to deal with it if you ask the right number of questions to determine what you're actually dealing with.
Right. And as you showed a little bit earlier, you also have x-rays, so you can deploy those to take a look at, you might not need to pull out the robot and have them do what they're doing.
No, absolutely. Although we have the option of neutralization, you're absolutely correct. We can employ x-rays to see what's inside a suspicious package left behind or a suspicious box, and that may tell us what's inside without resorting to the use of something with more effect.
Awesome. Lieutenant, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about the bomb disposal unit with the Royal Canadian Navy.
It's our pleasure.
So out of curiosity, during your time there, did you have the opportunity to go and render safe any ordnance?
So when I was in the United Kingdom, they have a term called the number one operator. So the number one operator is the operator in charge of a bomb disposal team that handles both conventional and improvised calls. So I did about 75 of them as the number one operator, which is really the crux of why Canada sends clearance diving officers to the UK, because they gain the experience in the UK that we wouldn't likely encounter here because we just don't have the same frequency of calls. So,
sure.
There's a Royal Navy EOD team on the road every 18 hours in the United Kingdom. They do about 300 calls a year,
wow.
Whereas our unit, Fleet Diving Unit Pacific, does about 85.
Okay.
So it's much more ordnance
yep.
throughout the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
I responded to 4 improvised explosive device calls, one of which had 10 small fire-based improvised devices. And that one there was probably the most I have ever done my job. And that's where you are in a position where you are being asked to make this scene safe. And typically improvised devices are a little bit, I would say they're a little bit more dangerous than conventional devices because they're manufactured in that makeshift way.
Right.
Whereby you're unsure of how exactly they function, so you have to ask the right questions and build yourself, a picture
right.
of what it is you're walking into.
Yeah.
Whereas with conventional devices, they typically have been seen before, and you can typically identify them by eye.
Right.
Generically.
Right.
Yeah, the one call with the 10 incendiary IEDs was probably the highlight of my exchange. That was.
How long did that take you, Kevin, to kind of go through that and render that scene safe?
It took about 8 hours.
Wow.
So we got the call at about 2 p.m.
Okay.
And we were there until 10 p.m.
Wow.
And a large part of that is not only initially arriving, asking the questions, and determining, what it is you're facing before taking the appropriate action.
Yeah.
It's also, there's a great deal of forensics involved because there's a criminal element to calls such as that. So
right.
You want to make sure that you are exercising forensic responsibility,
yeah.
ensuring that the scene is safe, then ensuring you collect the required forensics so that the proper authorities can prosecute a criminal
yeah.
Proceeding.
Right. Interesting. Tell me now about Fleet Dive Unit Pacific specifically. How big is this formation, and where do you see the unit going forward in terms of like modern approaches to the job that you guys do?
So the way Fleet Diving Unit Pacific, I believe, is trending towards is more and more remote work. There is a term, it's taking the member out of the minefield.
Okay.
But the idea behind that concept is the more and more we do remotely, the more it is safe to do. So working back to that, how does the hurt locker differ from reality? Doing things with remote drones, robots, anything like that to keep our members out of harm's way, that I believe is the direction that Fleet Diving Unit Pacific and Explosive Ordnance Disposal are trending.
Right.
So, again, one of the jobs of the diving unit is to clear sea mines.
Right.
One of the options you have for clearing sea mines once they're found is to put a diver in the water with an explosive charge to place upon that ordnance, and then to return safely ashore, safely back to their diving boat, transit some area away, and then conduct an explosion.
Right.
A controlled explosion. But there are other means out there remote disposal means, where they're effectively small torpedoes with cameras
Right.
that you can remote control directly into a mine. They're disposable, they're one-time use, but you save all the trouble of putting a human being in harm's way.
Right.
So I believe there will always be a place though for diving, because there are areas of the world, areas of the maritime environment that robots will not be able to penetrate. So in the surf zone, for example, from 0 to 3 meters, it's very difficult to put any robot in there with any degree of accuracy. But that's still an area that we would be required to keep, or sorry, to assure that was safe.
Right.
So I believe there will always be a place for diving.
Right.
I believe divers will always be an option.
Yeah.
But I do believe the future is trending towards remote and drones.
Interesting. So, Kevin, thank you so much for this chat. I love hearing what you guys do, and I think our next step is to go and actually see some examples.
That is a fantastic idea, Jody. I can honestly say that my desk is, in my office, it's not that exciting. It's really the members who do all the really exciting stuff now. So I think it'd be a great idea to go see them.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you.
I'm Sailor First Class Michael Raco from Hamilton, Ontario. I've been a member of Fleet Diving Unit Pacific as a clearance diver for the past 5 years, and I've spent pretty much that entire time up here in the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Department, which is just a fancy way for us to say the bomb squad here in Esquimalt. So during the work hours, 8 to 4 usually, we're responsible for responding to any calls regarding explosives on the island or on the mainland as well, if we have to. And these are just some of the items that we've picked up over the past 2-3 years. If we start the right here, this was actually I can't remember exactly. This may have been my first ever call. It's just an old World War I potato masher hand grenade. And picked it up down on Esquimalt Road. It was my first call. It was pretty green at the time. Great experience. We liaised with the police pretty much for every call, but it was just fantastic to actually get out there and do your job. And I guess an important piece to say is everything you see here is inert. It's all practice. It's all safe. Anytime we do have respond to a call where there is anything potentially dangerous or any sort of explosives or anything we think may not be safe, we dispose of it right away in a very safe manner. So we only bring back things that are interesting to us and that we can use for further training. So another example is just a 3.5-inch anti-tank round, or just for just another fancy name for a rocket propelled grenade, right? RPG rocket launcher kind of thing. It's just looks exactly like the real thing, but we can tell just on stamping and through our training that it's just a practice inert round. And so we use this all the time for training the new guys or just enhancing our skills. Another round we have here, just a 40mm solid steel shot, similar to these two rounds here. Just solid metal, just shot from a cannon for training. No explosives in it, but these are things that we like to have around here. We practice metal detecting, we practice searching, we practice just responding to calls, so that way when the real thing does come, we're completely prepared for it. A few more things here, again practice, just a couple of mortars, some bigger ones, some smaller ones. And ones we see a lot are just these little hand grenades, Mark 36s, American grenades. They're everywhere. You wouldn't think it. I didn't think it till I got in the trade, but now that I've been here for a couple of years, I picked up probably 15 or 20 of these in the last couple of years, and it's a great job. We enjoy doing it, and you're constantly learning. And it's important to bring these training pieces back so that we can better educate ourselves and then the public with situations like this.
Awesome. And Mike, if you don't mind, tell me about that split round.
Split round here. So this is just a 4-inch solid shot projectile here. Imagine just a bigger version of this essentially. We picked it up. One of our EOD guys determined it was safe, so we brought it back, and then on one of our range days, we were practicing with some cutting charges, and we decided, like, why not try to cut this thing in half? Solid steel, very difficult to do, but the guys that did it, very good at their job, and they were able to cut it directly in half. I don't know if you can see right there, just perfectly in half. Can't find the other piece. It must be rotting away somewhere, but just a very cool thing we do, and it's one of our ways that we can dispose of around it if we have to in a safe manner. But like I said, we bring it back for training, and that's what we did.
Awesome. Tell me one of your most memorable responses, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. So it's probably going to be this one again, this old World War I like German hand grenade. It was one of my first calls just down on the Esquimalt Road. We received a call from the RCMP or from RJOC that they found this, or this was discovered in the house after they were called. So I guess the backstory was someone was on parole. Their parole officer came to do a surprise inspection, and during the inspection, they noticed what looked like an old hand grenade or something that probably shouldn't have been in someone's living room. So we went in there with the cops. They pointed it out. We weren't sure at first if it was a live round or if it was practice. So we had to take all the precautions to ensure that it was safe. And then through our investigation, we determined it was safe, so we packed it up, we got out of there. But then we also helped the RCMP kind of go through the house a little bit too, to make sure there wasn't anything else there, because it was a little sketchy of an area. So we had to do our best to make sure that when we're leaving that scene, it's safe for everybody.
Very interesting. And how much training does it take to get up to speed where you can deploy on call outs like that?
So we can deploy immediately after our conventional munitions disposal course, which is just a quick 2-3 month course in Gagetown. But we can't act as like the person in charge of the call. You're there as an assistant, for instance. But after we do a 7-month course in Florida, and after that 7th-month course, we're awarded the I guess the authority to go out as the lead on the call, and then we're the ones that actually discern if a piece of ordnance is safe, if it's unsafe, if it's live, if it's practice. So after you're done that course, you've been in the trade for probably 2-3 years. So it's probably safe to say about 2-3 years of your career before you can actually get out there and lead a call.
Awesome. And you also dive as part of your trade, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have a side that you are more inclined to, like the dive side or the land side of the job that you guys do in terms of explosive ordnance
That's a good
disposal?
question. So personally for me, when I got into this trade, I wasn't aware of the actual scope of what it encompassed. I thought clearance diver, just as a name, I thought it was predominantly diving.
Right.
But since I've been in the trade now for 5 years, I've been solely in the bomb section. So I actually haven't dove very much in my career. I've been strictly on land, which I love. But there is a big dive element that we do. It's just not very prevalent in this department.
Sure. No, fair enough. Thank you very much, Mike. It's been a pleasure.
MIT, thanks.
Thank you.